Hello, today we'll be talking about VMware vSphere ESXi 8.0. So it was recently released in October 2022, and I thought I'd go ahead and cover it a little bit because I want to make some other videos, try things out on different hardware, and of course having different types of virtual machines on top of it. So first thing you need to know is it's very similar to the previous version. So if you're used to version 7 or even 6.7 or 6.5, know that the 8.0 the installation is very similar, and of course it will support all the newest hardware, and of course it will also support all the latest operating systems as of this date. If you like this video, please give us a thumbs up, and of course please subscribe. That really helps us out. We so appreciate it. And anyone out there who wants to become a member, we'll go ahead and put your name on our next video as a thank you. So if anybody's interested in that, that also helps us out. So thank you so much. So let's go ahead and take a quick look at what the release notes here say. So really, as you can see, it was released. Here's the build from October 11, 2022, and we're talking about build 205.13097. So that's an excellent way, by the way, of knowing what version you have in the future. When you install these things, they basically will if you burn it onto a USB stick, of course it's not really burning, but if you take an ISO and you go ahead and put it on a USB stick, then that's one way to go and take a look at which version you have. And of course, if it's installed, that's how you'll be able to read it. There is a website, in fact, on VMware itself, you can go and check out the latest build, so you know if you've got the latest one or not. And they do come out with these every once in a while. So for security reasons alone, it is recommended that you go off and you keep upgrading your host's machines. And the host machines are the hardware, so a physical server that runs VMware ESXi. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about what's new. Really, the point is I want to show you the ease of installation. So I'm going to go ahead and install this today on a Dell PowerEdge R640. And of course, you have an R650. It's the exact same thing. They look the same. And of course, you just get newer processors with an R650. And, so without further ado, first thing you need to know is when you download these things, if you're using a Dell, go ahead and use a custom ISO image. So that will have, for example, in my case, I've got a Dell. So if you do that, you download the one from Dell, you will have the built-in drivers that you need for that hardware. And the reason you want to do this, a lot easier, just install it. It automatically it can find the RAID controller, the NICs or the network interface cards that you have on there, and you've just simplified your life. So that's one way to do it. So the first thing you'll notice is they've come out with it in a bunch of different languages right off the bat. Compatibility. Some of the things you'll notice again is you need a more recent server. So you need a machine, something with a more recent processor and so forth. What I want you to do is if you have any doubts, you go where it says VMware Compatibility Guide right there, and you can go and have a look to see, does my server support this? I just made a video recently, for example, showing how you could use a 6.0 to run 2022 of Windows Server. So I mean, the reason why you'd be stuck on older versions most of the time is your hardware is not compatible to the latest ones. So if you have a 440, a 740, and above, because it goes up to the 50s right now, then they will be compatible without a problem. Some of the things that you will notice in here is they do depreciate, they do remove the compatibility to certain operating systems. For example, here you'll notice it says it no longer supports Windows XP, Windows 2003, 2003 R2, VStat, of course, anything prior to that. So if you've got a Windows 95, hopefully you don't, but if you did, then this would be a problem because it may not run. I guess we'll have to test these things out to see if it still does run, but it's not supported because sometimes that's what's happening. And at other times, it just fails because the drivers aren't recognized or something happens. So there is always that. And of course, you've got a whole bunch of different popular Linux versions, Ubuntu and so forth. So you've got your versions on here. So try to keep that in mind when you install these. Now, the other thing that you will notice is, and we've discussed this in previous videos, it says duplication of USB and SD card devices. Now, do I have one around? I do not, but you can boot off SD cards and USB keys. In fact, that's what I'm going to be doing today. But however, what they don't want you to do is to have the full ESXi, or the full vSphere ESXi if you prefer, running strictly on a USB or an SD card. And the reason being is these, one of the partitions on there, or multiple different partitions, have a lot of read and writes, and they will wear down that media too quickly. So they've had issues with this, and in fact I've encountered this myself, especially with the later versions of 7.0 and so forth. So what they've done in order to prevent us from having problems, they're basically saying, hey, don't do this, and if you do this, it will ask you to move those partitions, or to create those partitions on something that is better built for a server, like an SSD drive, whether it's an NVMe or it's SATA, whatever it is. The point is you need something that can handle the reads and the writes and won't wear down as quickly. So in that case, I certainly urge you to just install on an NVMe drive or an SSD. You could use a mechanical drive as well, so that's certainly acceptable. It is slower, but please do that instead. So if you're in a lab like me, then using an SD or a USB partially, so just to boot, might be an option, especially if you're really just trying this out and you're testing stuff out. It's still slightly acceptable, and it's one way. You take out the USB stick afterwards and just reformat it and use it for something else. So apart from that, you've got, of course, VMware tools. There's a new version of it. I mean, these are all very, expected upgrades to this. And one of the interesting things is direct upgrade from 6.5 to 8.0 is not supported. So that what that means is you'll have to have 6.7 or 7 in order to upgrade to 8. If you were still on 6.5, then you'd have to go to 6.7 or 7 first and then upgrade it to version 8. So let's go back here, and one of the things you'll notice with this new operating system, one of the things that I guess becomes really important as far as new features is this data processing unit, or DPU. So this becomes a new way of thinking about your resources, and with version 8 basically it provides support for NVIDIA and AMD. And so you'll also have, where it says here, Pensando Smart NIC devices. At that point, what you can do is use network interface cards that have intelligence built in, and they'll offload the CPU. So a lot more, I guess I should say, of the processing that relates back to the intelligence built into the network. So everything that deals with packets, encryption, and stuff like that gets offloaded. And so it helps out the overall speed of the server. So that's one of the things. The other thing, I'm going through this very quickly. Let's see. So, well, they're removing 32-bit user world removal. Let's see if I can find anything. So they're removing the TPM, or the Trusted Platform Module 1.2. So at this point, you will be using TPM 2.0 instead of 1.2. And it does remove insecure ciphers as well. And let's see if I can find anything that's really sticks out at me. Of course, the major, well, another reason to bring up to version 8, primarily for me anyways, is both stability, because they do fix a lot of bugs from build to build, and of course the security aspect. As soon as there's things that get discovered along the way, they respond by creating either new drivers. I guess it all depends on what the issue is to begin with, but they will build in the better enhanced security into the later builds, and that by itself is a good reason to want to keep updating version, build to build. So you've got things like OpenSSL 3.0 support, so NVMe over Fabric. So these, I mean, some of these were not available. Syslog enhancements. You can now disabling SSH access from the vCenter. Phasing out LSI SAS controllers. So that is interesting. So basically what they're saying is will automatically safely replace the the SAS controller for VMs on Windows 10 and later and Windows 2016 and later, and you suddenly have a native VMware vSCI controller. It's saying here that because the LSI SAS driver for Windows has reached its end of life. So again, this is another way of staying on top of the changes as you go along. Let's see. So they've got, I'm probably missing stuff in here, so I apologize in advance for anything I may have forgotten along the way. Really what I want to do today is show you the installation, so that's my aim for today. So let's see if I can, is there a list of anything else that I see on here? As you move forward, or as you move into higher and more recent versions, what you're going to find is not only support for newer pieces of hardware, like we mentioned TPM, for example, but you'll notice that most of the time it bumps up both the CPUs, it bumps up the hardware level for the VMs, so usually you get increased processing, you get the number of processors you can have, amount of memory, and so forth. I don't have all the specs here, but at the end of the day, also they will give you, for example, the Tanzu, Kubernetes, and then you've got. So there's a slew of things. So let's go ahead. So the first thing you want to do when you want to install it is you're going to go ahead and download the ISO. Again, if you've got a specific machine, an HP, a Dell, you name it, go and find the custom ISO. So you'll go into the download page on the My VMware. That's where you download it. And once you've downloaded that locally, you're going to use something like Rufus, which then, I call it burning, but basically it sends it to a USB. And so in this case, what I've done is I've taken the ISO, put it on a USB stick. It's very small in this case, but and I'm going to go ahead and stick this into the front of the server. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to go and show you my screen as I install this. It's really similar to version 7. Keep in mind that this is a lab environment, so I'm not doing anything super complicated with this ESXi 8. It's really going to be a base, and this in fact is going to be a trial version of it, so I'm not even going to put a key into it because I really want to load I'm trying to load one operating system and just set it up, do a few tests on it, and that's going to be it. It's going to get wiped and we'll start again. Now, if you had a more complex environment, you want to go into production, you want to have multiple servers, well, in that case, you're going to want to make sure that you add the vCenter and go from there. So let's go ahead and take a quick look at how we would install that. Now, the thing to keep in mind is with a Dell, for example, once you put it in, you start it, you've got to press F11 to go and pick where you're booting from. So let's go ahead and do that. And you'll notice there's multiple places to put USB cards or sticks in here. There's really the one that you want, or the one that I want, is right here in the front. And as I said, at some point it's going to come back and it's going to ask me to press a button, and I'm going to go ahead and press F11. Now check out the BIOS version. It's relatively important, and I don't know that this is going to be a problem or not, but make sure that you have the latest and greatest BIOS and any firmware you can for your server, no matter whether it's an R650, an R640, or 750, 740, for whatever it is. Make sure you got the latest. It will save you from having issues. I've seen this before where I called support once and just could not get something to run, and all it ended up being was the version of the firmware for the network card. So here we go. So I'm going to press on the boot manager. So I've just pressed F11, and if I had iDRAC on here, this certainly would make life easier. This server does not have iDRAC enterprise version like I usually suggest getting, so this one did not have it, and so I'm going to go ahead and select one-shot UEFI boot right there, press enter over it. Now it's going to come back and it's going to say, okay, which one do you want? Now what's really nice is you'll see it says disconnected to front USB. And so I get to see there's an internal, there's an integrated. So I've got all my choices here. So I wanted the disconnected to front USB, as you've noticed. So I'm going to press enter. And that's going to bring me to the ESXi 8 that is on that USB stick in the front. So we'll just be a little patient. This is relatively fast, especially if you have a later version of server. Of course, the faster the server tends to go faster. So let's see if it loads. That's very good. So I'm just going to go ahead and tell it to boot. Okay, so here we go. So this allows us to then move forward. So you press enter to continue, and you now have to press the F11 to agree. And it's going to go ahead and scan. I already have version 6.0 on a USB stick in here because I did this previously in a video. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put it into my, which one was it? I believe it's this one here. That's going to go ahead and scan that. So it's telling me that you cannot upgrade. So I'm going to go ahead and click enter, and then it's going to say, okay, so ESX is being installed, which is not recommended, which is fine because we're on a lab here. So we're going to click on next. We're going to just click by default on US. Now you got to put in a password here, so make sure you pick something that is difficult for anybody to guess. Here we go. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go press F11, and there we go. So we are now installing version 8. Okay, so here we go. That took a while, right? Okay, so what we want to do now is basically take out the USB key in the front. So I'm going to go ahead and see, it says remove the installation media before rebooting. So let me take this out. All right, and simply press enter. And it's going to go ahead and restart the server. All right, so we're going to go ahead and let it boot on its own. Okay, so now that we are up and running, what you can see in the yellow, hopefully it's, let's see if we can get you to see this specifically. Okay, so what we've got is, it basically says it right there. It says HTTP 192.168.1.134 DHCP. So our server, so this is version, again, 8.0. You can see right there on top. And that's what it was given by the DHCP server on the lab network. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to go and type that in. So let's get back here. All right, so what I've done now is basically, you see when you go in first, it says your connection is not private, so you're going to click on advanced and go to proceed. So go ahead here, and this is what the new login screen looks like. Now keep in mind, this is the ESXi host and not a vCenter, so you are logging in as root by default, and you're putting in the password that we saw earlier. Now this is about where I'm going to wrap up. Let me just go ahead, and it's going to ask me to join this. This is the lab environment. I'm going to say no. But really, you're going to see is it looks very similar to what we had in the past. The graphics are a little maybe nice. I don't know if I find nicer or not. But it does give us a bit of information. Of course, there's no data store set up. But I do see all my hardware here and so forth. And I've got it says that it's ESXi. Here's the build number that I was mentioning earlier. And this is the custom ISO. So it's A00. And that's pretty much it. There's my serial number at the bottom. And so now I'm set up, and I could go ahead and create a new VM on here and set it up. So that'll be for our next video. So if you're curious about that, look up ESXi 8.0, and I'll be installing Windows Server 2022 on it. So follow me in that video. So I'm Bob Pellerin, CTOBOB. I hope you've enjoyed this. And of course, leave us some comments below. We love hearing from you, whether it worked, did not work. If you appreciate it, leave me a note. I love to hear, hey, this was great, saved me or helped me or whatever the case may be. Sometimes, perhaps I missed something. It happens all the time. But if there's something I did not cover and I can answer on the bottom, or I can add in the description of this video, I certainly try to go back and post if I've done some errors. I don't script these things, as you can notice. I just kind of go and do them, since I do them all the time, and sometimes things go a little astray on me, and you've got to sort of adjust. But in this case, it was pretty smooth. It took a little longer than I anticipated. I've actually installed this 8.0 before, and I thought it was faster. So depends on the hardware, depends on what you're putting in, depends what you're formatting and what you're putting it on as well. I think last time I had an NVMe drive, so that might have accounted for the speed versus right now that I've put this on a USB key. Not the best again, but I certainly can counter that. Now I invite you to go to VMware and check out all of the different things that they've added to it. And you'll notice here they've got this blog, and they just tell you all about what's supported, the fact you can now put Windows 11, the whole new virtual hardware version 2, and so forth. So that's it. That's a wrap up for this video. Thanks so much for watching. We'll catch you in the next video.